As a leader, you need to change your mindset from being the subject matter expert to actually going beyond that and thinking strategically overall, looking at the mission and vision and values of the organization and breaking those down into bite-sized pieces for your own group within that organization. And that's what I want to bridge that gap is the middle managers are our succession plan. And if we're not going to set them up for success, we're going to continue to have the same mistakes happen over and over. I would say to any middle manager, it is worth it. Invest in yourself. Start making these changes. You will be amazed at where it takes you.
Jennifer, welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thank you for having me, Jen. I'm excited to be here.
All right. Well, let's talk about executive presence. Like people throw around the term like it's some kind of secret sauce you can add. And I have trouble understanding what that actually means. So can you paint a picture for those listening?
So to gain that executive presence where you move from being invisible to that executive is to start thinking tactically. Well, executives think in business outcomes and enterprise impact. And so as a leader, you need to change your mindset from being the subject matter expert to actually going beyond that and thinking strategically overall. And that can include looking at the mission and vision and values of the organization and breaking those down into bite-sized pieces for your own group within that organization.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you said before we were recording that I think was brilliant is like, how do you make the connections across the business, right? And so you have your area of expertise, but how do you make those connections among other areas in the business, right?
Yes. So you need to become that business architect who sees interconnections across functions and how that works and impacts the organization. So that's a mindset change.
It is a mindset change. But, there are some people that their strengths are details, right? They really function there. And so there's always this call for leaders to be more strategic. But what if it doesn't come naturally to you? What if you're kind of naturally like, I'm in my lane? How do you start looking up and out?
So it takes baby steps. You're not going to do it instantaneously. You need to do it small bite-sized pieces and sit down and figure out what that looks like because you are going to have to elevate yourself and trust your team to fill in the gaps that you normally were doing and allow them to now take that over and become the supporting lead in that team and helping them be successful. You don't want to micromanage because that's going to totally destroy the team and the look and feel of the group because nobody wants to be micromanaged. And so it's taking that and moving beyond that to support and become your lead. And sometimes you need to follow your team and do it from behind to push them and to be their guide.
And do you find that definition of executive presence, I mean, it sounds like it could. I just want to ask you this. Like, does that translate across different companies, startups, different industries? Is that pretty much a general definition of executive presence, like getting out of your own specialty and taking that big step back and bringing those connections?
Definitely. Because no matter where you are, you're going to have to elevate yourself. If you're an entrepreneur, yeah, you still have to be in the weeds at times, but you're going to have to start bringing in people to do those and elevate yourself when you're presenting to the world in order to get that business that you need.
Yes. And how do you do that? You know what I mean? So you said baby steps, but is it one of those things that you would come in and say, hey, boss, so let's just say you're director level and you're talking to your boss and they are a VP. And you're saying, what? I have a new idea. Have you thought about this? Or I've noticed the connections between X, Y, and Z. Like, what does that look like?
I think it depends on how willing and open your boss is to the feedback. But it's also presenting, hey, this is the new strategy that I have planned, and it supports the needs of the overall organization. What do you think? And in some cases, the VP may not even have been thinking about that and going, actually, that's a brilliant idea. I should be doing that as well. But it's having that communication and who knows what you could do and to transform the organization just by doing these little things.
There have been scenarios where I've known directors and they're the strategic ones, but their bosses aren't. And their bosses don't necessarily invite them to bring the strategy, right? They're kinda trying to keep them in the box of, "No, you just do your role, I got it," even when they don't. So how do you work within those confines and those constraints of reporting to somebody who isn't gonna help your executive presence be known?
So that sometimes is a tough one because do you keep going and staying with an organization that doesn't see value in what you're bringing when that's truly what's going to make the organization grow? And sometimes you have to move departments or you may have to find a different organization, especially if they're not willing to be open to what you bring. But it could also mean sitting down with them and having a conversation and saying, hey, you don't seem to want what I'm presenting or what I'm bringing to the table. Is this what it's intended? Or is this something that I've done wrong or you don't see value in? And they may actually come back and say, hey, I didn't realize that. I'm really sorry about that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm always big on honest communication, and bringing it up, and, you also talk about influence and how leaders everyone needs to have influence, but if you're thinking about that middle manager trying to raise themselves up, thinking about influence makes people sometimes equate it with being manipulative. So how do you recommend middle managers have authentic influence, right? So they're being authentic to themselves,
Hmm.
but they are still making a habit of being influential.
So to not be manipulative, you are going to try and understand what motivates each of your stakeholders and your team members and aligning their interests with the desired outcomes. You're going to master the art of making others feel heard and valued while guiding them toward optimal decisions. You're going to build networks of reciprocal value rather than just the transactional relationships. And you're going to develop the ability to change minds through logic, emotion, and social proof rather than position power.
What do you mean by that last bit? I've got a few more I wanna dig into, but what do you mean by that last one?
So you're not going to use your position as this is how you're going to do it. That's
Mm,
not influencing them. You're going to allow them to change their minds and using logic and just how you interact with them. You're not going to say, this is how it's going to be done. You have to do it my way or no way.
got you. Yeah, that's they'll either do it begrudgingly or they'll do the opposite to spite you, right?
Yes.
Well, okay, you said this, and I think it's not always clear. So you said to understand what motivates them. How do you know and how do you pay attention to that? Because everyone is motivated differently, right? Some people are motivated based on facts and logic. Some people it's more an emotional, sometimes it's a story. So how do you look for clues?
So for me, because I worked as a project manager for years and having no authority but all the accountability, I had to very quickly learn what motivated each of my team members. And so I watched their body language, watched their responses, I involved them in different discussions. I made sure that when we were doing any planning, that they were part of it and they were telling me their timelines, not me telling them their timelines and just figuring out what worked for them. Also, chocolate works big time.
So bring chocolate,
Yeah,
but maybe your approach, you say something and then you watch how it goes over, and then you tweak it accordingly?
totally. And each person is different. So you need to evaluate and understand why they respond the way they do and what really gets their juices flowing. You can see it
Mhm.
in meetings, you can see it in your day to day interactions. You can very quickly pick up on what's going on with them.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it'd be a lot of getting in that curious mindset as opposed to going, "Ugh," they're not responding how I want them to respond, but more of curiosity and, "Hey, could I tweak that and say it differently or approach it
Yeah.
differently?" The other thing you talked about is reciprocal relationships. Explain that a little bit.
So it's a two-way relationship and being able to understand how you respond to situations and then allowing that other individual to be able to say, hey, you overreacted in this situation. I don't know if you're aware of it, and having the freedom to go back and forth and have that transparent relationship because it's not one way. And as the leader, you are not the smartest person in the room, and you don't want to be the smartest person in the room because there's so many other people that have so much to offer and knowledge and
Mhm.
insight that you're not aware of.
Right. So is being able to be called on your stuff or your, I'm
Yeah.
gonna say bad behavior, or just some of your mistakes or is not
Yeah.
realizing something and being okay with it.
Yeah. And being open to the feedback.
Yeah. So when you think about the leaders you've seen in your career, like the, we'll say middle managers, what are some mistakes that they make and that may prevent them from advancing into that C-suite level or even just the VP level, right? Getting into the higher level roles?
I would say some of the biggest mistakes is they are focusing on doing the work versus designing the work and the systems.
Mhm.
And they are right now optimal for what they were doing in their current role. And they now need to transition into developing that executive strategic thinking process. And also, they need to be comfortable with ambiguity and navigate that, as well as the stakeholder ecosystem management.
As a separate one,
Yeah.
stakeholder. Yeah, that is something that, I've interviewed someone who was, from director and went to C-suite. She was VP and then went to C-suite, and she talked a lot about collaborating with her peers. Like, it wasn't just managing up anymore, it was like, "How do I collaborate with all the different department heads and VPs and getting to know them?"
Yeah. Because you're now no longer just managing up or down, you got to manage sideways too.
Mhm. Yeah, and when they aren't successful at that, because I'm thinking like, because I work a lot with early leaders, and so these are all very common things they do as well. But how do they ever get to that stage? Because no one's coaching. I mean, middle managers don't get coaches and they don't get a lot of that development. So is it really what you've seen is putting it on the middle managers to figure it out themselves, to find their own resources? Because I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. There are some VPs that will groom and get them ready, but it seems like this is something what I've seen in my corporate experiences is they just have to figure out how to stand out.
They do. And that's a huge gap. And that's what I want to bridge that gap is because the middle managers are our succession plan. And if we're not going to set them up for success, we're going to continue to have the same mistakes happen over and over. And you're going to have high turnover rates. You're going to have low productivity. And so I don't understand why organizations won't invest in, 15,000 to 50,000 a year in their middle managers and support them because they can totally increase your profitability. The ROI would be huge.
So when you think about the people, like, and on the flip side of that, that have made that successful transition, you know, what do they do differently? I mean, obviously you can say, oh, well, all the opposite of what the other people don't do, but like, what do you feel like are the things that separate these people who actually get to the VP level and above?
I think the big thing, if you really want to be great and get above, you do need a coach or an advisor to support you as you grow. And a lot of those that are really great are self aware. They understand themselves and they understand their teams and they know why they respond the way they do, which makes them much more effective than those that just go in thinking, I can do this. No
Mhm.
big deal. And it's usually those that are arrogant that are going to fail and they're not going to be successful. They still can get there. And I've seen a CEO even say, I've never made a mistake in my life. I haven't failed ever. And I'm like, what message did you just send to your team?
Right. And that's a
I,
lie. Just no one told them.
totally. You're in denial, sir.
Right, right. Because I mean, the higher you get, people are less honest with you, right? They're gonna tell you what you
Yeah,
wanna hear as opposed to the opposite.
totally.
I like that point about self-awareness because that is a critical leadership skill that a lot of us miss. We just cannot know everything that the missteps we take. I put my foot in my mouth all the time. Like, I need someone to be like, "Jen, you shouldn't have said it that way." I need that, right? But if you're
Yeah,
not willing to hear it, or if someone approaches you in a way that you can't receive at that time, um, it's important to let it process and think through, "How can I get better?"
definitely.
Now, I've got a theory. So, in my corporate experience, there are people who rise above. I remember there was this time in corporate where I swear to God, everyone was getting a VP title. Everyone and their sister and their dog was like, "Oh, you're a VP and you're a VP." I was like, "What's going on here?" Um, but I've seen that sometimes it doesn't matter how good of a leader you are, as in managing your people, leading your people. They were more of, well, there's some that just managed up, but I don't think they managed across very well. Um, how important is it to be a good people leader versus being I'm strategic and I'm connecting the dots?
Oh,
Does that
I
question
think,
make sense?
yeah, I think it's invaluable to be a people leader, especially when we're dealing with so much complexity in the world today. We've got AI, technology changes so quickly. You're dealing with gender differences, neurological diversity. There's so much change happening that you have to be more empathetic as a leader. And those are major things that are coming right now that you as a leader have to understand your people more than ever
Mhm.
now. And it can't
You
be the authoritative leadership style that we've been accustomed to.
so I guess yes, and so I definitely believe from the people's end, like you impact the people so much, their well-being. But is it not just part of reality that you can be a not great people leader and still get ahead and get to that higher level?
Totally. And it's usually based on who you know, not what you know, which
Right.
is not great. Because if you look at our careers, how many great leaders have you had in your career?
I've been very fortunate. I've had definitely some ones who I would never wanna emulate, but I've had some really good if I look back with grace, right? If I look
Yeah.
back and go, "Ooh, actually, they were pretty good." Like, I've had a lot of good ones, and I've had some not so great ones. So I've had both, but I have
Yeah.
asked that question in a leadership training, and someone said, "I'd never had a good leader."
And typically the response I get is 1 to 2, and I've had maybe 2, which is sad because there could be so many great leaders out there.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some I nitpicked at the time, and I look back and I was like, "Actually, they were pretty decent," right? But I've had a lot I was fortunate, I guess, and I worked in a company, I swear we reorged on a new boss, like, every year. So, it's like, "Oh, new boss, okay." But yeah, it does matter. It really
Mhm.
does matter to the people you're impacting, and you impact them greatly. Absolutely.
Definitely.
So if you had to say, the fastest way for a middle manager or a leader to stand out and get noticed and maybe potentially get promoted, what would that be? What would that look like?
So 1, become more self-aware. Figure out what your strengths and weaknesses. There's many tools out there that can help support that. Understand why you respond the way you do, and then be able to change some of those behaviors. And then start working with your team and supporting them, but also start becoming more strategic in your thought process and start to grow that.
How? Because that's
And
the
I would
hardest
say,
thing for people who aren't naturally strategic. How?
well, start by looking at the company's mission, vision, and values, and then start to bring that to your team. And one big thing to start building your team is get them to help you write in the mission, vision, values for your team that support the organization so they know where they're going. And that's the biggest part of that because then you can go into the executives and say, hey, we did this as a team. This is what we're doing. It supports the organization overall. And that will bring huge insight into your leadership skills as well.
Okay, so it's bringing in the mission, vision, values of the organization, and then did you say figuring out how the team could support those, or did you say create team mission, vision, values?
Create team mission, vision, values, and that will help support the internal team mission, vision, values, and because you've got buy in, and then the organizational values as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I recommend leaders do as well, and I think it gets so lost in organizations, right? It's something that's on the website, you may say it at a town hall now and again, but it gets easily lost in the busy work.
Totally, because they don't know, like, overarching organization, this is what it is, but how do each of the individuals' teams support that? And that's where the leaders need to come in and create that for their teams so they understand how they're participating in the overall organization mission, vision, and values.
Mhm. And when we're thinking, like, let's just say a leader goes and it's like, makes some of the tweaks and starts going, "Okay, I can improve that." Like, what length of time can they expect from kind of going from invisible to getting noticed? Because when you're talking about the process of, I gotta be self-aware, I gotta get feedback, I gotta understand, it takes time, right?
Yeah.
But you don't wanna take forever because if you're in an organization that's not recognizing you, as you said earlier, then you may need to think outside. But what is a reasonable time frame for leaders to kind of start building some of this executive presence?
I think it can be anywhere from 3 months to a year, depending on the organization and the individual and how much time and effort they put into it. You don't want it to be big bang because of the fact that none of us will be able to do big bang. We've got to do small incremental changes and continue to build on that to continue to grow. And it also depends on the organization. Are they open to seeing you and seeing
Mhm.
what you're doing?
Yeah, because there are some times that they're gonna put you they have a picture of you in their mind, right? And they're gonna keep you there, whether you
Yes.
change or not. Yeah. Um, so what else? Is there anything else, that you recommend for leaders to get seen or get promoted that maybe I didn't ask you?
I think also consider getting a coach or an advisor. And yes, it's a little bit of an investment if your organization doesn't support it, but I would highly recommend it because they will hold you accountable, they will challenge you, they will support you, and they will provide honest feedback to get you to where you need to go.
Got it. So, where can people find out more about you and your work, Jennifer?
So you can find me at authenticleader.ca or you can email me at info@authenticleader.ca as well.
Okay, I will link that all up in the show notes. But anything you want to end on? Anything I didn't ask you? Anything you'd like to say before we end?
I would say to any middle manager, it is worth it. Invest in yourself and start making these changes, and you will be amazed at where it takes you. If it's not within your current organization, it could be in another one.
Well, Jennifer, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.